Well, here we are back again talking some Cincinnati Bengals. Some changes have been made, obviously, to their roster and a little bit of a different look, and that's an understatement, to this team going forward. We're going to talk about that, their new quarterback that is stepping in, as well as what the game plan should be against the Minnesota Vikings and maybe potentially even going forward, as well as keys to a win, all things Jake Browning, some recent roster additions, everything. We will be covering that on the Orange and Black Insider Bengals podcast as we look ahead to week 3 with the Bengals traveling to Minnesota in a tough game, pitting two backup quarterbacks against each other. I'm Anthony. He is John. As I mentioned, this is OBI, part of the Believe in Cincy podcast channel in the Believe podcast network. John, how you doing? You and I have been doing quite a bit of the other podcast appearances and stuff. We've been making the rounds a little bit. I feel privileged.
Yeah, I mean, we should probably charge our buddy Strawberry Ice at this point. We're just regulars there. It's almost like the second OBI, I guess, kind of. But
yeah.
I mean, it just kind of. I mean, you said it'll be a tough game, maybe tough for us to watch, considering it's a backup quarterback matchup. But I don't know about you, man. I saw the notification pop up on Twitter today. Jake Browning press conference, September 17th, and it's just like, wow, that's real. We're really here, I guess.
that is real. Here we go right here. Dan coming in strong. Look at this. The Bengals are 0-6 all time in Minnesota. Time to fix that. Well, it would be fitting if Browning was the one to go in there against his old team and fix that. We'll have to see if that actually comes to fruition. But at this point, though, John, the Bengals are in a major transition on offense. They're doing some things, some positive things on defense, but they are still finding their way on that side of the ball in a number of different ways. But to remedy a couple of different things, the Bengals made a couple of moves here. Old enemy, Mike White of the 2021 Jets upset. He has been added to the team, and the Bengals placed Joe Burrow. However, Zach Taylor did not fully rule out a return by Burrow this year. I'm still very reluctant to believe that he's coming back, and I know Zach didn't have all the details about when the surgery was, and obviously it's cloudy about this 3-month timeline that's been thrown out, but the Bengals did make some moves as they ascend Jake Browning to the starting role.
Yeah, not exactly trading for Jameis Winston or Kirk Cousins. You have two practice squad quarterbacks, not just Mike White, but also Sean Clifford, who I don't know if he's from Cincinnati, but I know for a fact that he played high school football in Cincinnati for the local powerhouse, St. Xavier High School. What was with the Packers, 5th-round pick from there. Mike White, I don't think a lot of people know, was not drafted by the Jets. He was drafted by the Cowboys back in 2018, and it took him 3 years to eventually play. His first game came right before he made his first start against the Bengals, but obviously that game against the Bengals is what everyone remembers, and of course Bengals fans repress aggressively. But yeah, that's what the quarterback room looks like now. It was expected that Brett Rippon, who was signed to the practice squad during final cuts, right after final cuts, it was expected he would be elevated to the active roster to be Jake Browning's backup, and I guess it kind of makes sense that now you have Jake Browning throwing obviously a lot more in practice. There's, I guess, a little bit of a physical wear with that, and you want to make sure that you have enough arms in the building to get through practices, everything like that. And now that things have obviously changed, I don't know if there's going to be like some sort of practice squad competition between Mike White and Sean Clifford. I don't even know if that really exists, but they did have a spot open because Muma and Jong Meta got signed to the Carolina Panthers to their active roster. He's the second player off the practice squad to get signed to another active roster in the past week. So that's how that kind of came to fruition. And yeah, I think if anyone was expecting like someone serious to compete with Jake Browning to be a starter this early in the season, I think that was a bit misguided. So this was kind of the expected route, just to get another body in the building and have Browning and Rippon, go forward on the 53.
And depth. And again, I think the Bengals are going to both posturing wise, coach speak wise, and roster move wise, they're going to make this appear like it's, and it is Jake Browning's show now. They don't want to have any kind of inkling, at least at this point. They are 2-0, and they don't want to have any kind of Jake Browning having any kind of feeling of, oh man, I screw up, I'm out, that sort of thing. They want it to be his show to run, and we'll talk about potential game plans going forward. But yeah, I mean, the Bengals did make some moves, not ones that were thrown out regularly by X folks or, anything on social media, but they did make some moves, didn't really move the needle that much, but not expected to, because this is going to be the Jake Browning show going forward. And additionally, just kind of on the, we could talk a little injury report going into this one later, but Shamar Stewart battling an ankle issue, Marius Mims, he's battling an injury issue as well. And then you had Cam Taylor-Britt leave practice early, was meeting with trainer Nick Cosgray, I believe, that was reported as of Wednesday. So that's not good news, as he had a very nice rebound in week 2 from week 1.
Yeah, good news with Amarius Mims. He was not on today's injury report. He was obviously last week, and I think he missed like 6 snaps or something of that nature. But yeah, it was you never know when players who are limited on the injury report get injured during practice, or they were just dealing with something beforehand. But it did seem like with Cam Taylor-Britt, his hamstring injury that happened during practice, which is why he needed the treatment. So that's probably the main thing to potentially watch for this week. We know that Shamar Stewart is officially, he was listed as doubtful by Zach Taylor when the week began, so he's probably not going to practice at all this week. Logan Wilson, like you said, also has an injury that is limiting him right now. That could have been something that he had entering the week. So it's the longest injury report of the season, even though it's only 4 names. And we'll get to the full injury report later. But it's significantly shorter than what the Vikings are going through right now.
Yeah, and it stinks too, because obviously with the Burrow injury, they were so healthy going into the start of this season, and it's starting to, I don't want to say avalanche, but it is starting to collect a little bit here, as it does this time of year. So that's, I don't want to say to be expected, but it's part of the process here, especially early in the season. Guys also still trying to find quote unquote game shape and that sort of thing. So some of these things happen, unfortunately, but we'll talk more about the injury report in just a second. I want to remind folks that this program is available on the Believe, BLEAV, in Cincy podcast channel, along with a slate of other Bengals-centric shows. Hopefully you enjoy this show and the others, and you can get those, at least on the audio side, on your favorite audio streamer, whether that is iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, all the major ones. You can get that. Leave us a review if you can. If you like the video side of things, we stream to a few X accounts, as well as on the Cincy Jungle Facebook page and on our YouTube channel. You can go there, youtube.com/@BengalsOBI. Pretty easy to find. And you can check out a lot of different stuff that we are doing throughout the regular season. We just had an interview with Sam Hubbard ahead of his Ruler of the Jungle, week 2 Ruler of the Jungle stint. A lot of fun always catching up with him. Great guy. And hopefully if you went to the game, hopefully you checked him out in the Crown Royal rig. I think it was pretty hard to miss, or at least that thing was hard to miss. So hopefully you went and said hi to him, and we appreciate him joining the show. But that, other interviews, other post-game shows, interviews with all kinds of different people, we've got a bunch for you. So go check out in our library, whether it is on the audio side or our YouTube channel. Go check those out. We appreciate the support. So with that being said, let's talk. And I think this is going to be a Jake Browning centered conversation here. The Bengals go to Minnesota this week, and Minnesota is now trotting out Carson Wentz, who hasn't been a substantial starter, I think, in 4 years. He's kind of had some spot starts here and there. I think when the Chiefs were resting players, and thanks again, Chiefs, late last year, I think Carson Wentz was the guy who started, and the Broncos throttled him, if I'm not mistaken, to get them in the playoffs instead of the Bengals. Regardless, he has not been a steady starter for the better part of 3 or 4 years. He is going out there. The Bengals are road dogs in this one, with Jake Browning returning to Minnesota. But the big question, John, is what do we think the game plan is going to be? Is it going to be a blend of what we saw with Burrow? Is it going to be a little bit of what we saw in 2023 with Jake Browning? Or is it going to be primarily what we saw in 2023 with Jake Browning, more under center, more play action, some quick outs, quick get the ball out quickly, that sort of thing? Is that what you're expecting right away? Or do you think there's going to be kind of an ease into that transition because of all of these players practiced and played in preseason, played the first 1.5 games with Burrow on offense and took the majority of the snaps with him?
Right. And I think that's why the first time that this happened, the offense looked exactly the same in Browning's debut start against the Steelers, and it just was a complete catastrophe, right? It was terrible, and that's why they needed to make adjustments. And Dan Pitcher gets a lot of credit for making those adjustments as the quarterback's coach. Now, obviously, as the offense coordinator, has a lot more influence and a lot more input on what actually goes down, more than he had last time. So I think that should be a lesson to make these changes earlier than later, as opposed to just kind of wasting a week just to see if you can get away with minimal changes. Zach Taylor has said that there's not going to be that much change. Jake Browning has said that when you're in the quarterback room, like it doesn't feel that much different. You're still looking at the same things. You're still focusing on the same things. And I think that makes sense to say because you don't want to give the opponent a tip that like there are going to be major alterations. But I would hope that you would see the implementation of the things, the wrinkles that you mentioned, like just a more diverse looking passing game in which there are just easier opportunities for Browning to not get hit. There are easier opportunities for the ball to get out quicker and for more space. And you're not running like the hard mode offense that Burrow obviously is accustomed to running. I do think there's weight to like what you said though, because there was obviously a lot of time and reps being spent with Burrow, and maybe you don't want to make such drastic changes initially, and maybe there is weight to that. Maybe you see sort of a balance this week in between the offense that you're expecting and not. But also, I think the biggest question here is the offense wasn't in its final form, even remotely close to being it, right, under Burrow in the first 6 quarters that he played. And that's kind of, par for the course for this team and everything like that. I would be interested to see if they were to make the evolutions that they typically make midseason. Then Burrow goes down, right? Which is what happened in 2023, right? The offense was starting to click before his wrist injury. We haven't seen that yet. And I wonder if because we haven't crossed that bridge yet, how different are these evolutions going to be now that there's a new quarterback? They're obviously going to try to tailor everything to make sure that he's comfortable and he's as good as possible. But the fact that we're still in this part of the calendar that we always expect, the offense is still finding itself. How does that impact and affect the changes that they have to make? I would have to imagine that they're just going to have to try to do more things and kind of just throw stuff off the wall to see what sticks.
I have kind of a two-pronged thing here. One is a statement, and I want to get your thoughts on it too, obviously. But the Tanner Hudson breakout really started to stem from. I mean, he had some moments with the team, but there were moments where he and Jake Browning were clicking at the end of 2023, and I feel like Noah Fant, Mike Gesicki will be very effective with and utilize more potentially with Jake Browning in the lineup, at least than what we saw the first couple. I know Noah Fant had the touchdown and that sort of thing. I think we'll see an increased amount of snaps there. I don't know how you feel about that. If you think I'm a dummy for saying that, or the other thing is, do we start to see now, because more under center, because more play action, are we going to start to see more Samaje Perine, Taj Brooks on offense as running backs? Because Chase Brown has just, he, aside from the first 2 drives against Cleveland, it has just not been effective. We haven't seen those guys on offense much, if at all. And I feel like maybe mixing in a bigger back, so to speak, even if it is to avoid your 3rd and 8s, your 3rd and 9s, if they can get the 3 yards in a cloud of dust type of thing, if they get you a couple carries that makes you 3rd and manageable, that is far more preferable than obviously 3rd and long, which we have seen a lot of in the first 2 games.
I think when Chase Brown gets the opportunity to just power through and move forward through contact, like he's done that. And it's just that the opportunities just aren't there. Like I'll be honest, I don't think Samaje Perine gives you anything that Chase Brown can't at this point. I think that's just because Samaje Perine is 30 years old, something like that. Like he's
well,
just not.
He gave you some juice on special teams last week.
Sure,
You know,
sure, yeah. I think there's value with him as a kick returner. I don't know if like just giving him more touches is going to give you anything different than Chase Brown. I would be interested in Taj Brooks though, just because he's a lot fresher, and I think he's got a lot of power to give, and you saw that in the preseason, right? I think P. Ryan's value is still on passing downs as the check down option, as the pass protector. I think that isn't necessarily going anywhere, and I think it's probably even more imperative now that he's in that role. Now that you have a quarterback that you don't really trust to make some of these decisions in like an off script sense. As far as tight end usage, though, like I'm still, again, it's still so early in the season where like you don't know how that's going to progress, because obviously Gesicki didn't play that much in week 1, and then he led the position group in snaps in week 2 over Drew Sample. Noah Fant continues to get opportunities, but your Sample's obviously going to be your pseudo starter, I guess, because he can play on all 3 downs. So I'm still interested to see how that position group evolves. But yeah, like when Tanner Hudson was kind of coming into his own, that's also just when Jake Browning happened to be taking over, and then they kind of rode that momentum that he had. So I don't necessarily see that picking up, but like we kind of talked about in the previous show, Hudson worked a lot with Browning in the preseason, just like Mitchell Tinsley. So again, like he could be a player that maybe they put him on some more packages just because there's some familiarity there.
Yeah, I would agree with that, and especially as Browning kind of starts to regain his starting quarterback footing. I just kind of feel like, getting these easy completions to those big targets, especially with Noah Fant's yards after the catch, open field speed type of thing. I feel like they may try and take some easy opportunities. My thought is, again, in terms of game plan on offense, I think the tight ends will be a little bit more involved. I do think that T. Higgins will get his Jake Browning loves those 50-50 balls to T. Higgins. So I think we're going to still see that. I see Chase being, there may be, the deep shots still, but I see more, a little bit more, maybe quick hitters, yet let Chase do yards after the catch stuff and utilize his athleticism that way, instead of, the bombs away type of thing and a lot of the deep balls that we saw last year. I just think, we talked about this with the rebound from the offense against Cleveland, some rhythm passing, some things that are confidence building passing. I think that is even more critical now with Browning under center and taking over in a tough situation. I think that really resonates a little bit more now with this overall situation on offense.
Right. And I mean, we can have the Jamar Chase discussion about how they want to use him, but it clearly didn't impact his production this past week. I mean, 14 receptions for 160 something yards. And I believe, the majority of that obviously came with Browning at quarterback. And one of them was just on a simple screen pass in which he got finally like a Bengals wide receiver screen, got some good blocking. And of course, Chase takes it for like 30 yards or something like that. The last time I saw it executed that well, he took it for like 70 yards against the Ravens, like almost exactly a year ago. So yeah, those plays will be in the playbook. And it's obviously something that, Minnesota is definitely keen in on. I think they realize that when Burrow is not in there, like they're just going to use Chase differently, and they're going to try to make sure that he can pick apart underneath and try to maximize his yards after the catch ability. And if Jake Browning does get those opportunities, though, like we talked about, like he's not going to be afraid to take those one-on-one shots. And that's something that, the wide receivers need to be on the same page. It's definitely something Yoshi needs to be on the same page, because unfortunately, like I think Browning's first interception was because he kind of stopped running his route. And again, that was probably a factor of just, new quarterback in there. The chemistry is not all the way there. Yep. So that's what this week of practice is about, making sure that everyone's on the same page. And the wide receivers that worked exclusively with Burrow are now working with a different quarterback, which I guess, Anthony, is different compared to previous preseasons when Burrow wasn't healthy in the preseason. They were only working with Browning. So now everything's all discombobulated now. Like everyone thought that, okay, this is going to be the year that Burrow is there and you're going to get all the work in August. Now everything's flipped. So,
and this is part of the game plan conversation. We're getting a couple comments. Aaron Powell on the Facebook says, looks like Jake, and you mentioned that they've been working together, that sort of thing with Mitchell Tinsley. You got Andrew Wood saying, do you think Tinsley is becoming the third receiver? That sort of thing. Jermaine Burton, from what we know, healthy scratch first 2 weeks, right? He did have some sort of issue that caused him to miss a little time in the preseason, that sort of thing. But right now, Burton is kind of a non-factor in the wide receiver group. Yoshi, statistically, after taking a nice leap in year 2, is also a statistical non-factor. You just mentioned, he maybe there's some, development growth that needs to happen with a new quarterback, that sort of thing. But where do you see Tinsley fitting in here, depth chart wise? Like, is he based on that catch last week? Number one, I think we both agree that he probably deserves at least a few more snaps per game. Probably based on what we also saw in the preseason, red zone snaps, right? And I mean, I don't think he has ascended Yoshi because of what the sample size we have of Yoshi is much more robust than what we have of Tinsley, but I think he has earned more time and more looks in this offense, particularly with Browning and the chemistry that you said they developed maybe in the offseason, preseason, that sort of thing, because they were working with the lower depth chart guys. So they have built that chemistry already.
Exactly. Like, I mean, he was in the same unit as Charlie Jones and Jermaine Burton for most of like the final part of the preseason and training camp. And he just happened to take advantage of his opportunities in a very spectacular way in the preseason.
Insane way. Yeah.
Right. So, I mean, he had 10 snaps against the Jags and Charlie Jones had 1 on offense. So if you want to look at it from the current stance right now, he's probably wide receiver 4. I don't think that they're going to take Yoshi's job away from him right now, but I think he's going to continue getting that sort of involvement. And if he continues to take advantage of his targets and you're not seeing that much production from Joseph, then you could see some sort of shift there in the coming weeks. But I think the fact that he has his preseason quarterback in there now, like there's going to be some sort of a trust factor with Brian. We talk all the time about how much Burrow relies on trust with his guys, and I'm sure the same is the case with Browning. Like obviously he's going to have trust with Chase and T. Like they're getting paid millions and millions of dollars to do this, right? Like there's going to be a sense of like I can trust throwing up to this guy. But I think that's kind of the case right now with Tinsley and how he feels about it, and the fact that like preseason wasn't even that long ago. Like I think that also matters as well.
Aside from Tinsley's, one-handed catches and all that kind of stuff, his I don't even know what you would call it, man. I don't know if it's a mental capacity or whatever, but to get his feet down in just really tight areas, that's a pretty spectacular trait that he's exuded. So I think maybe he becomes a little bit more of the red zone guy in some ways, and Yoshi becomes kind of a little bit more of the in between the 20s type of guy. But we'll see what happens going forward. John, I know you wanted to talk before we transition to the Bengals defensive side of the ball. I know you wanted to talk about Jake Browning's press conference. You mentioned it at the onset of the show as well. Some interesting takeaways and talking about this game plan conversation. He kind of touched on that a little bit, I think.
Yeah, I didn't think that this was like a big deal until I heard him say it. Like I was kind of thinking about it, and I think someone mentioned it in the past couple of days. But obviously when he took over in 2023, right? Like it had been 3 months since he saw the field in any capacity, right? He played in the preseason. Obviously, Burrow was dealing with his calf and everything like that. So he got plenty of preseason reps. Then he rode the bench for 3 months, and then he was thrown back into the fire. Now, again, like I just mentioned, the preseason was only a handful of weeks ago. Browning was obviously getting plenty of reps in August, played the majority of both week 1 and week 2. I don't think he played in week 3, right? That was Desmond Ridder kind of running the show there. But August is when backup quarterbacks get 99% of their reps in the year. They spend the offseason making sure that the starter is prepared, and then they spend the regular season making sure that the starter is prepared. I think it does benefit Jake Browning to take over now, just 3 to 4 weeks since he's been getting the most of his work compared to when he took over in November and he was a lot colder, if for lack of a better term. You don't really think about like the icing of backups, specifically with quarterbacks, in which reps are so crucial, so important. If they matter to Joe Burrow, they matter to every single quarterback, right? And that's what he said. Like he said that he thinks it does make a difference to take over week 3 compared to week 11, just having all those reps that he just had, especially with guys like Tinsley. So it's obviously not ideal that you lose your quarterback in the beginning of the season. But I think from a backup perspective, especially a backup that you trust, if you think that your new guy can at least keep the ship afloat, it should be viewed as a positive that he takes over earlier so that he's not just being thrown into the fire months after last seen any significant playing time. And obviously he just played on Sunday, so it's not like he's just now this Sunday going in for the first time in a month. So that obviously helps as well. And maybe that's why he played maybe a little bit better than what we thought he was going to, for the first time he played in the actual game since 2023.
You could also make the argument that it bodes well for the end of the season for the Bengals should he continue to start, because more and more games, more and more experience, more and more film review, that sort of thing. You can make that argument. Look, I know we've got some folks, trying to, I don't know, throw cold water on things in our live chats, but it's not Joe Burrow. We know this, but we are going on the sample size of a 4-3 record, a guy who threw 12 touchdowns versus 7 picks and had another 3 rushing touchdowns. So when you have the positive effects, a positive winning record, a positive touchdown to interception ratio, not the case right now after half of football, but when you have that sample size and another win when he came in off of the bench this year, there at least has to be, you're obviously down in the dumps about Burrow once again, but there has to be some optimism there. And when you go back, John, to 2023, like you mentioned, he barely won that backup quarterback job.
Yeah.
I wasn't in that final cut room, but I mean, it was pretty tight between he and Trevor Siemian. Siemian was the guy that they brought in specifically, veteran guy, had starting experience that they thought was going to be the guy behind Burrow. Browning, I don't want to say barely outplayed him, but I mean, edged him, right, in preseason. And so the Bengals felt that he was the better fit. Maybe he plays a little bit of similar style of Burrow in terms of kind of, he'll do some things in the pocket. He'll gunsling it, like you said. And I have to give you credit. When you said gunslinger the other day on our show, I was like, is he a gunslinger? And then I was like, well, he throws those 50-50 balls. He trusts the weapons. It doesn't always work out in his favor, but he trusts the weapons that he has. So I think context matters. I know the stats and the wins losses don't necessarily wholly represent his performances in that time. And 2 of those losses were pretty ugly losses against Pittsburgh, which you don't like. But I mean, he had him there at the end, despite tough circumstances. And the hope is now that he will continue to do that. And again, I'm of the mindset I'm not expecting Burrow back this year. I don't know about you. I'm just not. I don't really see it happening. But I guess stranger things have happened.
But yeah, again, there needs to be a very specific scenario in which that his recovery lines up with the team needing him to the point where they are in playoff contention and Browning is just not good enough, which could be the case, right? But it's not something that they should be relying on. As much as Zach Taylor wants to not rule him out for the season, Zach is at this point very cautious with what he says about injuries and prognosis and everything like that. So I don't put that against him at all. But you're right. Like it's Jake's show, and they have to do everything that they can to support him.
It's Zach's version of Marvin Lewis is Partly Cloudy, right? For those of us old enough to remember that. Okay, so transitioning to the defensive end, we'll get to keys to the game and stuff, but it looks like Christian Darrisaw will not play again this week. His left tackle replacement name escapes me at the moment. Was it Kluk, or I can't remember his name. He is currently ranked, and there was a Viking-centric X account that posted this, that the Vikings offensive line is not performing well so far. And particularly their left tackle, who has stepped in for Darrisaw, is ranked 70th out of 70 offensive tackles in terms of pass blocking efficiency. Brian O'Neill on the other side playing well, but the rest of the group is middle at best, if not less. So this might be a week, particularly with yes, a mobile quarterback in Carson Wentz, but particularly in a week with a backup quarterback that Al Golden exploits some things with blitzes, maybe Trey Hendrickson feasts because of that left tackle situation, that sort of thing.
Yeah, and it needs to be a situation where the pass rush comes alive because the Vikings invested a lot in their offensive line this offseason. Will freeze Ryan Kelly, who's I think going to be out this week with a concussion. We can get more into the injury report later, but it's been an underwhelming group aside from just Christian Darrisaw, who's coming off of a torn ACL. Aside from him not playing, and I think maybe the combination of JJ McCarthy obviously taking his first ever regular season reps. It's a Skull, SKUL, the left tackle currently in for, again, one of the very best left tackles in the league, Christian Darrisaw. How about that 2021 class, by the way? Penei Sewell, Rashawn Slater, Christian Darrisaw, all first round picks, all absolute studs in that first round. But yeah, it's been Brian O'Neill basically holding his weight as one of the very best right tackles in the NFL. But the combination of shaky protection behind a quarterback that's still getting his feet wet has not been the best case scenario, which is why I am interested to see how much this quarterback change actually makes a difference for the Vikings in this scenario, because I don't think that McCarthy has been inspiring a ton of optimism necessarily at quarterback. And obviously Carson Wentz is nothing really special as a backup, but he does provide a lot more experience and he may know how to handle pressure a little bit more at this stage in his career. So it's up to the Bengals to actually finish some of these pressures because they are not generating pressure at a high rate. So whenever they do get into the backfield, they need to finish.
To me, this is, and I guess I'm sneak previewing a little bit of the keys to the game, but this is a big Myles Murphy game. We talked about Shamar Stewart, potentially being out this week. I think Zach earlier had said he's week to week after that injury. So he wreaked some havoc. Did Stewart in the first week, a little bit quieter week 2, but still a guy. Obviously, the injury played an impact on that, but still a guy that can make some plays. But Myles Murphy, do you expect him to kick inside on certain downs? The Bengals need to generate more consistent. I feel like a broken record. More consistent interior pressure from their defensive linemen. They invested in big nose tackle guys in TJ Slayton and Mike Pennell. They've got McKinley Jackson, who has also been healthy scratches the first 2 weeks. So they've got finally the big bodies in there. But BJ Hill had a nice first week, a little bit quiet this next week. They need to find ways to generate pressure up the middle. What did we say Monday, John? It was 11 pressures and 6 of them were from Trey Hendrickson. They have to find other guys to be able to be a threat outside of Hendrickson. You just have to. You can't be a one-trick pony on that side of the ball.
No, and I think what's been interesting is that, Trey is always going to be predominantly on the right side. It's not a lot, right? It's only been like 13 of his 108 snaps, but 13 of them have come from the left side, and there was a slight uptick in that this past week. I don't know if that was specifically matchup based against the Jaguars, but it's been interesting to see on a new defensive coordinator. Al Golden is not necessarily afraid of moving Trey to the opposite side of the formation, where he's been like exclusively a right defensive end for the Bengals. So, and he's been getting like the penalty that he had against Joe Flacco, like the BS, hit to the face, that was against the right tackle Jack Conklin. So he's been getting some slight exposure there. I'm curious if that continues this week, considering like the significantly more favorable matchup is against the left tackle, right?
Yeah.
But if you're more confident that Trey Hendrickson can battle up against Brian O'Neill, who's obviously a phenomenal right tackle, and you want to give Myles Murphy some chances at his more natural position at right end, maybe that's a case in which you can spark some production for him as he's going up against, again, a backup left tackle. So that's something to watch for. I wasn't expecting really any difference in usage for Hendrickson, even under a new defensive coordinator. And again, it's not a huge split by any means. 90% of his snaps are still coming from the right side, but that's something to watch for, I think, for the rest of the season, and maybe specifically for this game to get some other edges going in that regard.
I did think I saw him do the old Lou Anarumo drop in coverage once or twice as
we
well.
Don't need that.
Yeah, we don't need that. Vito Scott says, how come Al Golden comes from one of the most blitz defensive coordinators in college to straight zone coverage in the league? I think it varied. It is a good question. I think it varied from week to week, though. I think we saw more blitzing against a less mobile Joe Flacco than we did last week against Trevor Lawrence. And by the way, Vito Scott said, where have you guys been? Been a minute. Hey, we've been here, man. Where you been? Where have you been? But no, good to hear from you. That's my take on it. I feel like maybe the Bengals were blitzing a little bit more in week 1 because Flacco is far less mobile than Trevor Lawrence, but I'd love to get your take on that too, John.
Yeah, that was kind of consistent with Logan Wilson this past week. He only rushed the pass like twice compared to 4 times against the Browns. Warren Burks got some more looks though as a pass rusher this week, and I think he had a pressure on Trevor Lawrence. It's again, like I think this is a great question because you can't necessarily like if you have a man-centric blitz-heavy scheme in college, that's not exactly translatable to the NFL, especially on a
with the personnel you have, right?
Exactly. Yeah. Especially on an every single week basis. So he actually leads the league right now in cover 6 usage. And what cover 6 is just combining cover 4 and cover 2. Cover 4 on one side, which is quarters, and cover 2 on the other side. And that's completely against what he did at Notre Dame as well, because that was a single high defense playing like cover 1 man free, if you will. But that's just him kind of adjusting to, like you said, adjusting to the personnel that he has. And he still wants to, utilize man coverage in certain situations. And you're still going to see, blitzes up the middle from his linebackers. But like you said, it just depends on who they're playing in a certain given week. And maybe with a guy like Wentz, who I don't even like, do you consider still Carson Wentz like a mobile quarterback at this point? Because he's kind of getting up there.
That's a good question. Yeah, he's getting up there. I mean, I think he can move a bit. I don't think it's anywhere near what it was, when he was a full-time starter with the Eagles and whatnot. But like I said, this porous offensive line from the Vikings, I think there might be some opportunities to sneak in a blitz that may be very effective. So we'll have to see if that is part of the game plan. Let's transition a little bit to, and we had a couple questions about Zach that we'll get to at the end of the show here as well, because I don't want to gloss over those. But keys to a win for me, I mean, pretty easy to say. You can't have Jake Browning throwing committing 3 turnovers on the road. I mean, that's not. And so part of me thinks he's going to go into this game especially fired up, go back into Minnesota, beat them on their home field, regardless of their own quarterback situation. Part of me thinks, is he going to be pressing too much? Obviously his actual first start this season, I don't know, but you have to be, and I think the Bengals are still +1 in the turnover margin this year after the 3 turnovers last week. So you have to be plus in the turnover margin this week, especially when you are facing another backup quarterback.
Right. Whenever you have Browning in there, it's just about minimizing mistakes and combining that with still trying to push the ball down the field, because spoiler alert, this offense still is terrible at producing explosive plays, or at least early on in the season. They have one run over 10 yards, and that was Chase Brown kind of making the most out of nothing to get 11 yards, right? So it's not hard when you look around the league, man. Like, teams are running the ball better than they've ever had before, and it's just so still impossible. It's like running into a brick wall with the Bengals. I don't know what they're coaching these guys up front, but it doesn't look anything in the sense of cohesive. So getting a more efficient run game with Jake Browning under center, it has to be a priority. Like, you need balance in this offense, especially when you can't necessarily rely on your quarterback to have 40 straight dropbacks against a defense that is still coordinated by probably the best defense coordinator in the league, or at least the hottest defense coordinator in the league, Brian Flores, after the year that he just had in 2024. It's not exactly the same personnel on that side of the ball, but there are very few changes, and their identity is still the same. They're very aggressive. They like the blitz, and the best way to counter a blitz is by generating just consistency in the run game. And they're not, the Vikings are 25th right now, and rush EPA allowed, but it's week 2, and what they just did against the Falcons, like, the Falcons have probably the best running back in the NFL, and Bijan Robinson, and a really good pass rush. So that's kind of how the Falcons had success. And unfortunately, that's just not, those are 2 areas of the Bengals right now that still need a lot of work outside of Trey Hendrickson. So the Falcons showcased the path to success against the Vikings, even at home, but it's still in areas that I don't think you have tremendous confidence in the Bengals doing.
What? I mean, there are so many things, simple and complex, that go into making a run game effective. Obviously, you can just say, "Oh, it's as simple as they're just not getting pushed consistently." I mean, what is it through the first 2 weeks that is just hindering this run game? Because again, as I mentioned earlier, this team is still getting into 3rd and 8, 3rd and 9. Like they are just getting in really bad positions. And it is due to 1 or 2 ineffective runs to start drives. So what are you kind of seeing as like they're just not doing this? I know like, hey, they're just not getting pushed. Aside from the first 2 drives against Cleveland, where I thought the offensive line was really kind of starting to mow people over, it has been the complete opposite since. Is it figuring out the Bengals scheme? Is it bad reads by the running backs? Is it predictability? All of the above? I'm just kind of struggling to, like you said, so many teams do this with relative or a lot of ease, and the Bengals, it feels like it's just an absolute pushing a boulder up a hill.
They couldn't even run inside zone on the goal line against the Jags. It's like guys are just not in the right landmarks. They're not in the right position. And you want to talk about push, like you need the proper leverage to get the guys out of the gaps that they're going to be in. And they're just not in those spots. Whether that's Dalton Risner still getting adjusted to, playing next to these guys, whether it's Dylan Fairchild being a rookie and, the game is going a little bit too fast for him, whether it's Ted Karras, again, that's not necessarily the biggest strength of his game. Amarius Mims has yet to take that step as well. He's been kind of starting off his sets in like kind of a wide split away from Dalton Risner, which is allowing, guys to loop back inside. And that creates disruption as well. It's just a lot of moving parts that just aren't moving in the right direction right now.
Wow. Yeah, it's not good, but they definitely, like you said, they need to have some balance. They need to have some consistency in the run game this week. Lack of turnovers on the offense. And then, of course, they need to disrupt and create turnovers against Carson Wentz. I mean, these are all kind of cliched mottos, but when you are going up, especially a team at home, you've got a backup quarterback. You have to create opportunities again on defense. I don't know how sustainable, 2 interceptions a game at this point. I don't know how sustainable that is for the Cincinnati Bengals, but maybe it is a forced fumble. Maybe it is a sack fumble, that sort of thing. One of those big momentum swings that takes the wind out of the sails at that home stadium, because that place gets loud. That place gets very loud. And with their own backup quarterback making his first start of 2025, you have to create some havoc of your own.
100%. And that is the next step for this defense, though. How can they get off the field without just taking advantage of a mistake by the quarterback, which is not always going to happen? Like, I mean, Joe Flacco, Trevor Lawrence, Carson Wentz, and I guess you can throw Bo Nix in there. Like, that's definitely not a unfavorable,
not a murderer's row. Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah,
right. So you do have to take advantage of it now, but I still think that you want to see growth in terms of, guys finishing plays, finishing pressure, generating more pressure. That's just the key to this whole thing. Whenever they do break through the offensive line, good things happen. And if you just let Wentz sit back there and just buy time for Justin Jefferson, TJ Hawkinson, Naylor, I believe is his last name, the guy playing for Jordan Addison, Adam Thielen, who's still a really good route runner. Like, I mean, that's a problem that the Bengals would deal with as well. They got weapons. They got, comparable weapons, at least to the Bengals. They don't necessarily have their own T. Higgins right now with Addison out, but like they're not scrubs, and it's a good test for the Bengals secondary for sure.
Yeah, and I think what I would like to see, and I guess call me old fashioned, boring, whatever, but if you get some sustainability in the run game, you're able to utilize play action, hit those tight ends that we talked about before for some short gainers, chain moving plays, and then you're able to then open things up for those 50-50 balls, that sort of thing, to T. Higgins, some of those yards after the catch things to Jamar Chase. I think that's your ideal situation for the Bengals offense, but it's easier said than done given what we've seen from the offensive line and, just through the first 2 games in general.
Yeah. Well, I mean, what's left to do? I guess predict this game, maybe.
I guess. I know you absolutely love predictions, John Sheeran. I know you love it. What do you think?
This game is going to be chaos, and I'm looking forward to it, honestly. But I think, like you said, there's a lot of hype and promise around what Browning did not last Sunday about what he did a couple of years ago, and that combined with going back to the place that effing cut him, there's going to be some factors with that. He downplayed it tremendously in his presser today, saying like eventually you do have to move on. I think he did to a certain degree, but I think just being back there, being the starter, knowing that he's the starter going forward up against his old team, like there's going to be some factor with that, and I think there's a sense of his guys rallying behind him a little bit, but the Vikings defense again very aggressive, and they have good pass rushers. They have good defensive backs. I think it's going to be tough for the Bengals to put up as many points as they did last week. It just depends on how erratic can the Bengals make Carson Wentz in his first start, right? How much can the pass rush affect him? So I'm seeing like something like a 22-17 game, and honestly, either team can have those points. I'm not comfortable picking a winner here because it's just there's so many variables here. But I'm going to say the total points probably doesn't get over 40 unless something wacky happens.
Yeah. I had at the beginning of this week, I had about, I think, 2016 Bengals. That could go either way. I think, like you said, I think it's going to be an ugly score. I hope there's not a lot of turnovers, at least not on the Bengals end, but I wouldn't doubt there being some major speed bumps in this game in a variety of different ways. But when Jake Browning played and started for the Bengals in 2023, 2 of his 4 wins came in overtime. So I think just going forward, if we're going to, again, use revisionist history on this thing, I think we're going to see a lot of tight games going forward. I think we're going to see a lot of games that are one. I think 1 or 2 of his losses of those 3, at least one was a 1 possession game against the Steelers. It was 16-10. So I think that there's going to be a lot of tight games because it's also the same thing with Burrow. Browning is shown to be just incredibly streaky, right? Like there are massive dry spells where it's like, what are you doing? And then there are all of a sudden a flurry of 2 or 3 touchdowns, right? And it's like boom, 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 boom. And so I do think that we will probably see a bit of the same thing. I just hope that Browning channels the guy from, I don't even remember what it was, 2016, I think it was, in Washington, where he had the good weapons with John Ross, Dante Pettis, and was able to throw 40-plus touchdowns and be one of the better quarterbacks in the NFL. But
college.
College. It's going to take time. It's going to take time. I don't think this is going to be an over, even though he has starting experience, et cetera. I don't think NFL starting experience, not college starting experience. I don't think this is going to be an overnight, hey, he's starting again, we're going to be clicking. I think this is going to take probably a handful of games at least for things to kind of show some consistency and show the ability that, hey, yeah, we can play against and beat some of the better teams in the NFL.
Yeah, and again, it shouldn't go on, like, for as much doubt and concern about the Bengals, it shouldn't go unnoticed how much the Vikings are just struggling to just get a full team out there on the field right now. Aaron Jones went to IR again. Like, we don't know if they're going to have Darisaw out there. The thing with him is that he went full on Wednesday, but he also went full Wednesday last week, and then he was like limited for the rest of the week because they're just kind of seeing how he feels. So maybe he feels better this week, but it's not a given by any means that he starts, even if he practiced it the first game of the week. Like, Jonathan Grenard is limited. Donovan Jackson, the rookie starting guard, was limited. Again, Ryan Kelly dealing with a concussion. So, like, there's a lot of notable names on this list, and obviously they're dealing with a new quarterback. So that can't go unnoticed. As much as the Bengals are, we don't know what product they're going to put out there with the backup quarterback. The Vikings are definitely not in the best position, which is why this is entirely winnable for both sides.
Yeah. Well, let's drop the mic and get on out of here, John. It has been close to an hour, and we've talked a lot about the Bengals versus the Vikings and all kinds of different things. What do you got for us on the way out of the door?
Nothing too special. I did kind of learn, though, that obviously Joe Burrow, Jake Browning, Brett Rippon were all in the same quarterback class, high school in like 2015. I didn't know how far back Browning and Rippon kind of knew each other. They went to like a Boise State camp when they were both like 16 years old. So they've known each other for a long time. Like they're both now in like their late 20s. I think Rippon maybe 30. I'll have to double check that. But they've known each other for about half their life, and not too personal, but they've known of each other. And obviously they've been in the same quarterback room now for a little less than a month. And I thought that was interesting because obviously Browning's relationship with Burrow has developed over the years, and Browning knows kind of how to help Burrow kind of prepare during the week and obviously during the game. And he mentioned that it was kind of comforting having Rippon on the sideline. Obviously, he was in street clothes being a practice squad guy, but it was comforting for him to have a guy that he was familiar with kind of guide him through and help him out and be there for him while he was playing in the game and being on the sidelines and everything like that. And he'll have that going forward. And it makes sense as to why Rippon got the opportunity to be signed at the 53 because, that backup job is not just about going in the game in case something gets hurt, but it's about best supporting the starter in there right now. Right now, Browning has a guy that supports him and knows him pretty well, better than most other guys that they could have brought in.
Yeah. Oddly enough, I think if it was a Boise State football camp, I think my nephew ended up going to that camp as an offensive lineman when he was in high school. So that's kind of cool to hear about that. I don't have much either, but I know you are too humble to promote this. Did I read here that you are on a local Cincinnati radio station?
Oh yeah.
Weekly. Yeah. That is a big deal, my friend. So why don't you pump that?
Yeah. Every Thursday at 1 p.m. Eastern time, you can catch me on, I believe it's ESPN Cincy 360 with Austin Elmore and Tony Pike. Tony Pike is obviously one of my idols growing up, being the UC Bearcats quarterback. I told Tony Pike the story, and I'll tell you guys as well. It was right before COVID in 2020, and my dad took me to a UC basketball game. They played like Memphis, and they won. And after the game, I was looking out at the court in Fifth Third Arena, kind of in the concourse, and someone taps me on the shoulder. And before I turn around to see who it was, someone says, "Can we get a picture?" And I'm like, "Oh, it's cool. Someone knows who I am. Someone wants to take a picture of me." It's Tony Pike. And he doesn't want a picture with me. He wants a picture with these two random girls. So he just kind of asked me to get out of the way so we can take a picture with these girls. So I told him that story on air, and they all laughed, and Tony was embarrassed and everything like that. But it's really fun talking, ball with a guy that I obviously grew up watching play for my favorite college, and makes, so many memories for how good those UC teams were. And obviously Austin is a great host and a great producer, and he knows ball as well. So yeah, 20 minutes a week, every Thursday at 1 p.m. on ESPN 1530.
Well deserved. You know ball yourself. You're the brain of the show, and well deserved. I know you were too humble to bring that up, but I saw that.
Probably should though, just to get more people to listen to it.
Well, yeah. I mean, yeah, but yeah. I mean, I saw that recently, and I was like, what? We got to talk about this. So yeah, congrats to you, man. That's awesome. And those are two great guys, two great hosts as well. So wanted to plug that for you as well. This has been the Orange and Black Insider Bengals podcast, presented to you by FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. And as someone so kindly put in our live chat, always remember to gamble responsibly. But go and God, what's the over under? I don't even know. You on this Bengals Vikings game. This, like you said, bet under 40 maybe. I don't know, man. Go check out the lines at America's #1 sportsbook at FanDuel, and of course also presented by FOCO, the fans only company. Go get your exclusive line of Bengals merchandise at foco.com. The links to both sites are in our show description, so go check those out. We thank them for their support of this show, and this show is part of the Believe Podcast Network and the Believe in Cincy podcast channel. So if you're tuning in live, we'll be having the audio up shortly, and we appreciate your support there. Leave us a review, leave comments, questions. We monitor those things on YouTube, all that kind of stuff. Try and respond as best as we can, but we appreciate all of you for tuning in live, tuning in after the fact, and we'll be back with more after the Bengals Week 3 matchup. Oh, an interesting one against the Vikings. So, John, take care, buddy. We will talk soon.
Adios.